Very much. I am Marilyn Erickson, and I am the chairman of the Public Policy Committee for the Monterey Peninsula Branch. And I welcome Jackie. Thank you so much for giving your time to us this afternoon. We know you were up till probably all night, but you were in Congress till at least 2 a.m. passing this bill through the House that is going to bring so much relief to so many people. And now it's on to the Senate, so we can only cross our fingers about that. We thank you for giving us this time, and we know how busy you are. I first knew Jackie in 2008. I was living in Burlingame, and I would go to the office and help with her election campaign then. I've always sort of kept track of her and what she's doing, and she, of all people, is the perfect person to talk to us about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, because she is on the legislative side, very strong, and just everything she does empowers women. And it's always in the back of her mind because of her own personal life experience, which is amazing. So we want to welcome you. I'm not going to talk too much more. I have so much more to say, but I think we should turn this over to you because you're very valuable to us, and we thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Marilyn. It's great to be with you and everyone else via Zoom. I literally just walked in the door. I was on the plane for the last 6 hours because we had huge headwinds. But the 6 hours gave me time to do more research about our beloved RBG. So I'm entitling this The Collar of Dissent. And if you look at what I'm wearing, I rushed home to be able to put it on. This is a collar that is designed to be a very representative of the beaded collar that she had, and she would wear whenever she was going to dissent in opinions. I have a sweet little story to tell you. When I became one of the co-chairs of the Democratic Women's Caucus, we decided to gift her a collar because she had a whole collection, a wardrobe of collars. And so we had gifted her a collar. I'm not sure if she ever wore it, but she wrote back a note thanking us for it. And I have framed that note, and it's in my office. And in her tiny little writing is her thank you. So dissent is important, as we know, if we're going to protect this democracy. And in 2020, in the Gore versus Bush case, she dissented. And historically and traditionally, when you dissent in the Supreme Court, you say, I respectfully dissent. But for the first time, she said simply, I dissent. So I also researched a little about how we got Notorious RBG as a moniker. It was actually a law student who is more attuned to modern day rap music. And evidently there is a rapper called Notorious B.I.G. And so she got inspiration from that to name RBG, the Notorious RBG, and that has stuck as well. So when I think about her, I think about how she made the personal public. She endured personal discrimination, and in so doing was determined to change the course of discrimination, to rid discrimination for women across the country. You know, she also defied conventional wisdom, and, you know, in many respects was a very unlikely rock star. She was tiny, shy, and had a very soft voice. She grew up in the 30s and the 40s. Her mother died the day before she graduated from high school. And her mother was a very important part of her life. Her sister, her older sister, died when she was quite young, but her mother would sit her on her lap and read to her. And there's a quote, much like Joanna had mentioned, in which Ruth Bader Ginsburg says, "My mother told me to be a lady. And for her, that meant be your own person, be independent." So that was instilled in her at a very young age. So she defies conventional wisdom and goes to college. Now, think, not that we can necessarily think back, but she went to college in the 50s. She went to Cornell University. She was first in her class at Cornell. At that time, only 5.8% of women went to college, 9.6% of men, but only 5.8% of women. So already she is distinguishing herself. Today, by the way, 35% of women, no, 36% of those in college are women, 35% are men. So we've seen that change. Now, when I graduated from college in 1972, only 9% of women in this country had graduated from college and only 15% of men. So interestingly, from when she graduated to when I graduated, 20 years later, there was a 3% increase, only a 3% increase in women. But look where we are now, more women going to college than men. It's important for all of us as members of AAUW to appreciate, though, that only about a third of the population in this country graduates from college, even today. And so some of the discontent that we see across this country has to do with the fact that people who don't go to college are not, do not feel that they are given the respect that they deserve as hardworking Americans. And that's something we should all spend some time thinking about. In any case, she then graduates first in her class. And at that time, you went to college, if you went to college, to get your MRS degree. Well, not only did she go to college and get her degree, and first in her class, but she also got her MRS degree. She graduated from college in that same year. She married Martin Ginsburg, who was a law student at Harvard. So they marry. Within a year, she has her first child. Her daughter is born. So now they're at Harvard. He's a law student. He goes, has to serve in the military. She's there with her daughter. She then starts going to law school at Harvard. Her husband gets testicular cancer, and she's caring for him. She's taking care of her daughter, and she's going to Harvard for her own law school education and taking notes for her husband's classes as well. I mean, this woman is so miraculous that it's hard to capture it all. So she was one of 9 women in a class of 500 at Harvard. And the dean invited the women to dinner at his home. And he asked them, "Why are you taking a man's seat?" He asked all of these women, "Why are you taking a man's seat in this law school?" And now, whether this is true or not, but certainly the movie says that because he went around the room and asked each of them, she said, "Because my husband is a law student and I want to be knowledgeable about his work." So there was a timidity she often would show, surprisingly. So she's at Harvard, all these things happen to her. And on top of that, she gets into Harvard Law Review. I mean, it is really stunning. Her husband then gets a job as a high-powered lawyer in New York. She wants to continue to complete her Harvard education, and they won't let her. So she transfers to Cornell. She graduates first in her class in the law school in Cornell. Now, mind you, only about 3% of the lawyers in the United States at this time are women. So she graduates, again, she's on law review, and she can't get a job. Much like Sandra Day O'Connor, who graduates from law school, and the only job she could get was as a steno, as a paralegal in a law firm. So she goes on to clerk for a federal district court judge, I believe, and then takes a job at Rutgers Law School. She's the first tenured woman law professor at Rutgers. And then they're going to start giving cuts to the women at the law school. And she says, well, how much is the law professor so-and-so who has an equal position? And the dean says, well, he's making more than you. And she says, why? And he says, because he has a wife and 2 kids. You have a husband in a big law firm in New York City. Does she take that? No way. So what does she do? The Equal Pay Act had just passed in Congress. So she joins with other women and files an EEOC complaint in 1964 against the law school. And guess what happens? They don't like the publicity and they relent. She says, women didn't make a great fuss. We just filed the EEOC complaint and then they settled. And the increases they got, not only did they not get a reduction in their salaries, they actually got increases. And the lowest increase was $6,000 more a year, which, in 1964 dollars was significant. She then ends up at Columbia Law School teaching, and she approaches the vice president for business and told him that the university was violating Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. And she's in his office and he says, Professor Ginsburg, you should know that Columbia has excellent Wall Street lawyers to represent them. Would you like a cup of tea? In that case, the university was trying to lay off all the female janitors and none of the men. So what does she do? She files an injunction, and all of a sudden, all those women retain their positions as janitors. So her cases were so profound. I mean, she represented her first case, as a lawyer, she then went off and joined the ACLU. And that's where she really cut her teeth on gender issues. She started the Women's Rights Project, and she had more than 300 cases, many of them before the Supreme Court. And that's when that famous line, a gender line helps to keep women not on a pedestal, but in a cage. In that time frame, she also ended up representing a man who was not being given Social Security benefits after his wife had died on behalf of their dependent children. It was only at that time being given if a woman was widowed. And so she took that case and won that case. Now, once on the Supreme Court, many important decisions in which she led the opinions. One of them was the United States versus Virginia, and it was where the Virginia Military Institute only had men. Men were the only ones that were allowed to apply and be selected for the Virginia Military Institute. And that was in 1996. And then in 1999, Olmstead versus LC, it was a case of whether or not people with mental disabilities had the right to live in the community. They were objecting to the fact that they were institutionalizing them. And it was a case brought by Atlanta Legal Aid Society. Again, she led the majority, and that's why people are allowed to live in their communities now who have mental disabilities. And then the case of Aubergevall, the 2015 case that found that same-sex marriages or marriage equality should be the law of the land. And what I didn't know, but in researching this, found out that she, during her time as a Supreme Court justice, married a number of same-sex couples even before it was legal. She did get into a little hot water in 2016, which was not her nature, because she said that many times, fight for things you care about, but do it in a way that will lead others to join you. And I guess in some speaking engagement, she was asked about Donald Trump. And he was then a candidate for president. And she called him a faker. And then apologized for saying that, because obviously she's on the Supreme Court. If he were to win as president, she would be interacting with him. Her two favorite movies, you'll love this. Gone with the Wind. And she says in more recent films, it would be Three Billboards Outside of Ebbing, Missouri. And that was the movie, of course, that Frances McDermott played, in which she was trying to get justice for her daughter. And so I thought that would be a way of kind of kicking off our discussion this afternoon about the importance of dissent. The one other thing that's worthy of repeating is the love affair between she and Martin was so remarkable. And he was responsible for generating the lobbying effort around her being selected as a Supreme Court justice by Bill Clinton. I'm sure Hillary had some effort in making sure that that was part of it, but it was her husband who led the whole campaign. And he once said, even though he was a renowned attorney himself, he says, I stay out of her law work and she stays out of my kitchen cooking activity. So it's also worthy to remember that. And then something for me and many others to remember, her mother-in-law once said, in every good marriage, it helps to be a little deaf sometimes.
Very good.
So there you have it.
Thank you. Do you have, we hope you have some time for questions.
Absolutely.
Okay, so Fatima, if you want to take it here from here, I'll try to watch the screens. Oh, Fatima, you're still muted?
Thanks, Joanne.
Okay, sure.
How many times is that going to happen today? Thank you so much, Jackie, for that, history of everything. I have my niece here, and she's 18. So she was listening to, all the things that women have gone through that girls her age have no idea of what it was like for women and how we could be rejected and fired so easily. So the questions, though, that we have mostly don't have anything to do with Ruth Bader Ginsburg, but with her legacy and the things that have come. So, I'll work from the pre-submitted questions. So the first one is, can you say something about HR 1, the For the People Act, and its chances of passage? And that's the bill that would pull in PACs, super PACs.
Right. It will pass overwhelming. Well, it will pass in the House. It passed in the House in the last session, and I can't guarantee what's going to happen in the Senate. The problem in the Senate now is, even though we have a majority, we don't have a filibuster-proof majority. So unless we can garner support from, another 9 members or 10 members, really, we are not in a position to have some of these bills taken up. Now, HR 1 is so comprehensive. It deals with a lot of the issues around the the money in campaigns and how it's not properly disclosed, how 501c4s don't have to disclose their contributors. And that's where all of the campaign money is gravitating to now, because so many of those that do offer contributions don't want to be identified, and there are no limits. So it makes it, much more preferable. So there's efforts to rein that in. I have a couple of amendments that are included. If you remember when Louis DeJoy was being interviewed by us, he had engaged in conduct that would really be illegal by basically having his employees write checks to candidates at events, and then he would reimburse them through the business. So he'd get a business deduction on top of it, and he could give lots more money. Well, there's a statute of limitation under the FEC that is quite short. And so the amendment that I have that's been included will extend it for 15 years under one circumstance and 20 years under another. So I can't really say what's going to happen in the Senate, but I can guarantee you it's going to pass in the House.
Okay, well, thank you. Another question that was submitted is, what are your views on the likelihood of expanding the number of justices on the Supreme Court, or writing the size, or whatever the verbiage is?
I think that President Biden was very careful during the campaign to say he wasn't going to answer that question, which suggests to me that there may be room to expand the court. The court's in a precarious position now because President Trump made it such a political engagement. And then you had Majority Leader McConnell at the time, who stripped the filibuster, did the nuclear on that so that you didn't have to get to 60. So the middle ground justices were no longer being identified. And you have, as you know, the Federalist Society, which basically was dictating to President Trump who should be appointed. So, I think one of two things are going to happen. I think it's either going to be increased, or we're going to put term limits in place. Term limits and/or age limits.
Do you have thoughts on term limits or age limits?
Well, I actually think that I think a term limit would be good. I also think expanding the court is appropriate. It's not etched in stone. We had fewer than 9 at one point in our history. And I think to make sure that the court is representative of the country, we need to make sure that it reflects the country. Otherwise, I think you're going to see just real grave consequences. And, abortion being probably the most obvious one.
Well, and that was another question that was submitted is, do you think the right for women to choose will survive the upcoming challenges? I think the court just took one, or anyway. And, so you are a strong supporter of women's rights. How can we help you?
Well, I think one of the important efforts that we have to undertake in a very conscious, deliberate, and forceful way is making sure the Equal Rights Amendment gets placed in the Constitution. So my resolution that would strike the deadline date in the preamble will probably be taken up next month during Women's History Month. It passed the House for the first time in probably 36 years last year, and I have no doubt that it will pass again. And I think there's a very good chance that it will pass in the Senate. But there's other opportunities where the president could just ask the archivist to certify the Equal Rights Amendment, because now 38 states have in fact ratified it. Now, there are a number of states that attempted to repeal it, but there were decisions made many decades ago with the 14th Amendment where states attempted to repeal it and they were ignored. So there's good precedent there. So I think the Equal Rights Amendment is going to be the linchpin for issues like abortion, pregnancy accommodation, violence against women protections, and we really need to get that into the Constitution. You know, there's over 190 countries in the UN. I think it's 193. 176 of them in their constitutions have a prohibition against discrimination based on sex. And the United States is not one of them. Antonin Scalia was asked that question once. He says, certainly the Constitution does not require discrimination based on sex. The only question is, does it prohibit it? It does not. So here's the originalist on the Supreme Court. Now we have many more originalists on the Supreme Court. I think it's really important for us to recognize that it's time.
Thank you. That's an answer that I'm sure we're all, or an issue that we're all very concerned with, and are here to support. So let me see. So this question is, after years of being sidelined by the former administration, concerns of women will be front and center with the new Gender Policy Council. In light of this, what are the priorities nearest and dearest to your heart?
So I'm one of the chairs of the Democratic Women's Caucus, and we are expecting to have a meeting with that new council very soon. We actually had a Zoom meeting with Vice President Biden when he was a candidate, and gave him a list, a 3-page list of executive orders that he could undertake once he was president. And that was before we knew that we would have the Senate. In fact, we didn't think we would have the Senate. And so we wanted to alert him to all of the reckless acts by President Trump that undermined women and girls, both here in the United States and around the world, and urged him to take action by executive order. In many of these cases, he already has, which is really very good news in terms of Title 10, for instance, the funding for organizations like Planned Parenthood and community-based organizations, and repealing what's called the domestic gag rule, and re-engaging with countries around the world in terms of providing them healthcare for women and girls. So we're very hopeful about that. For my priorities, I think this recession, this COVID pandemic, is really a she session. There have been over 3 million jobs that have been lost by women, a net loss of 3 million jobs, more jobs last December and January lost by women. In fact, all the jobs, when you net them out, were lost by women in those months. And it's because women are leaving the workforce because they have low paying jobs. That's why making sure that we raise the minimum wage is so important, because 2/3 of the workers receiving minimum wage salaries or wages are women, and especially women of color. And so we need to have universal childcare in this country. Finally, I think everyone has to realize that that is our weakest link. That's our weakest link in terms of economic recovery. And many labor experts have referred to this as a she session because we don't have good childcare, and it needs to be universal. So many slots have been closed now. So many childcare places have been closed, and they tend to pay low wages again. So universal childcare, ERA, and protections, getting VAWA passed again, and sexual assault in the military and sexual assault on college campuses are my priorities right now.
Well, thank you very much. That's very comprehensive. I know the questioner, the person who sent in that question sent in a revision, which I missed. And she asked, I'm sure the gender policy energizes your advocacy for women and LGBT issues. Is that covered? I mean, what are your comments on that?
So, the ERA actually does provide protection for the LGBTQ plus community. We did just pass this week the Equality Act, but I must say that sometimes I feel that Congress is the last to act. The case I referenced in which Ruth Bader Ginsburg was in the majority that legalized marriage equality. If that was a bill before the House of Representatives today, it would fail. So some of the greatest benefits in our country, or decisions to right wrongs or prevent discrimination, haven't happened through Congress. They happen through the courts. And another reason why we need to have a court that's reflective of our country.
Yeah. And then thank you. I mean, I've learned a lot just this last half hour. And one of the questions, little switching gears, is what was it like being in Congress on January 6th? I mean, for those of us who were here and watched it, I mean, once you started watching, you couldn't stop. And can you share some of your feelings, what you'd want to share with us?
Sure, of course. Well, I was in the House gallery to observe the certification of the Electoral College vote, and I wanted to be there for California. And so when the speaker was escorted off the floor, I began to think, is something going on? And then Steny Hoyer, the majority leader, was, and I thought, something's happening. And then swiftly thereafter, one of the police officers stood up at the microphone and said, the Capitol has been breached. And we all kind of gasped. There were about 30 of us in the gallery at the time. We were asked to take this pouch underneath the seat and open it. I didn't know that there were pouches under the seats. And there was an aluminum foiled packet that you had to open, and out pops a gas mask. And we then were told to crouch under all of the brass railings and get to the other side of the gallery. And while that's happening, they started pounding on the doors of the House chamber. The Capitol Police and Sergeant of Arms put a large piece of furniture in front of the doors. They drew their guns and had them actually pointed at the rioters. We were then told to get down, take our pins off, our legislative pins off. And then all of a sudden I heard a gunshot. And I remember placing my cheek on the cold marble floor thinking, oh my God, here I am in my country, in this tabernacle of democracy. And I might lose my life here when 43 years ago, I was lying on an airstrip in Guyana and I survived that. So it was a very horrific day. It was horrific emotionally and physically. And it was so debilitating to think that that could happen here. I am running out of juice on my phone. So if you have more questions, I'm going to have to go to a charger real quick.
We do have more questions.
Okay, hold on. I'm just going to go to get a charger.
No, we're. And for people who I have, I think 2 or 3 more pre-submitted questions. So if anybody has any other questions, I'll open the floor for that in just a minute, as soon as
I get a charge on this
as
phone.
soon as the Congresswoman gets her charge on. But it's amazing that we can have you, having just flown in Monterey, Salinas, and Santa Cruz. There are many horrible things about this past year, but this Zoom and being able to get this kind of information is amazing.
It is, because imagine if I was supposed to be down there to do it, I wouldn't have made it. So
Yeah, exactly.
Zoom is great. Okay, I think I'm charging now. So let's get your final questions.
Okay, so there's a couple of questions that are similar. So, and it's basically watching what's going on at CPAC and watching what goes on in the news programs, a lot of just basically the big lie and the constant messaging of things that are untrue. It's like, how do you work with colleagues that are telling blatant lies? How do you work with them? That's really what
The question. Well, after this horrific experience that we all witnessed in the Capitol on January 6th, were, holed up in a secure place for 4 or 5 hours together. We then come back to the floor to finish the certification of the Electoral College. And then 2/3 of my Republican colleagues voted to overturn the votes in Arizona and Pennsylvania. So on the same day that this horrific situation had occurred. So it is problematic for us. And, there are some members now that don't want to vote on suspension bills, which normally are unanimous, if it's one of those members that were part of the big lie, who went to the rally and spoke at the rally and, encouraged people to go up to the Capitol and fight. And then, there's some great profiles in courage, and leave it to a woman. In this case, it's Liz Cheney, who has shown extraordinary guts in voting to certify all the elections, voting to impeach the president, and who has spoken out very clearly about the fact that it was a big lie. But I can tell you that Kevin McCarthy has one of the poorest districts in the country.
Mhm.
And he votes just the opposite. And he is, he can taste victory next in the next cycle to take over the House. And so he is capitulating to ex-President Trump in every way he can. So they're not going to cross him. So that does make it more difficult. Now, I am doing joint authorship on bills with a number of Republicans, but they tend to be moderate Republicans that come from districts that could flip Democratic. So they have to be on the right side of some of these issues. But it's very hard. So it's not a great answer.
Okay,
but
well,
it's
thank
an
you.
honest one.
No, and thank you for that, because I think everybody assumes it's hard. So, thank you for keeping up the good fight. A little switching gears, what are your views on the likelihood of granting statehood to DC, Guam, Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands, or American Samoa? I mean, do you think any of them have a chance?
I think DC does. I think Puerto Rico does. I think it's really abysmal that you have a population larger than the state of Wyoming that has no representation in Congress in terms of voting. Eleanor Helms Norton is the representative, but she can't vote on the floor. And while the Democrats will allow them to come on the floor and to participate, the Republicans don't, and their votes can't count in close calls. But I think that has the best path to getting rid of the Electoral College, or the impact the Electoral College has by placing greater power in the hands of smaller states.
Okay, thank you. And then the last pre-designated question. Oh God, and I can't find it. So, oh well. And I'm trying to think of what it was. I don't remember. So does anybody have any questions from, oh, I know what it was, because it's the Green New Deal. So we hadn't heard about the Green New Deal very much until the Texas freeze. And then they blamed everything on the windmills that do fine in Antarctica. But so, like the fact that they're not talking about it as much, but how do you think the progress is going toward the Green New Deal without it being called the Green New Deal?
So Jennifer Granholm, the former governor of Michigan, who actually lived in my district when she was young. She was Miss San Carlos at one point. She gets it. And by executive order, the president has taken steps, will continue to take steps. We're going to pass legislation. The infrastructure package, which will be the next package that we work on, will have a lot in it regarding energy. And I'm working very hard to stimulate the purchase of electric vehicles by providing really meaningful tax credits for a person to buy electric vehicles for two reasons. Obviously, because it's green. Secondly, because we're going to lose a couple of million jobs in our auto industry in the next 8 to 10 years if we don't shift to electric vehicles, because China will be eating our lunch, much like the steel industry has left the United States. That's what's going to happen to the auto industry. So more innovation in batteries, which is happening, is going to be very helpful in that regard as well. So the cap and trade, the dividend providing, we will certainly pass that in the House, and the question becomes how much we can get through in the Senate.
Okay. Well, thank you, Congresswoman. That does it for the pre-submitted questions. And if you have a minute or two left, I'm looking around to see if anybody's got a raised hand.
Sharon does.
Sharon does. Yeah.
Sharon does.
What do you think is the likelihood of the passage of the John Lewis Voting Act bill, or the Voting Rights Bill?
I'm pretty optimistic. Certainly it's going to pass in the House, and I think it's got a fair shot in the Senate. But, the Republicans have recognized that, vote by mail and any of those provisions that existed in the Civil Rights Act for those areas that created, the equivalent of Jim Crow laws for voting, are going to want to withstand that. They want to, the big lie about voter fraud is there. But the truth is, if everyone votes by mail and given that opportunity, then you truly have a paper trail. And then you can have Russia getting into our voting machines.
Yeah. Okay, any other questions from the floor? It does not look like it. Wait, there was somebody, Carol. You're muted, Carol.
What are the chances of doing away with the Electoral College?
Good question.
Slim and none. I think it would have to take 4 or 5 presidential elections in which the person who gets elected does not win the popular vote. and then maybe we'll see a change. Or we all have to start moving to some of these Midwest states so that it's more reflective of the population as well.
Okay. Joanne.
Yeah, I was just going to comment about that because, you know, I don't know, Representative Speier, if you're familiar with this. There is an organization, nonprofit organization, and they're trying to move towards the national popular vote. And they actually have signed up several states who
Right.
agreed to the state compact, and California is one of them. So
That's
for those of you who are interested, it's I think it's called something like the National Popular Vote, and just go look at it. And it's very, you know, interesting. It's not so much that it'll eliminate the Electoral College, but how it operates. And
I think there's 19 states that have actually agreed to that compact. And as you point out, California is one of them. Of course, you know, none of the smaller states are among them. There has to be some huge incentive for them to want to do it. And I don't think we've come up with that yet.
right.
And kind of getting back to the Voting Rights Act, because I was reading an article the other day about all the different states like Georgia, you know, where they're not doing get out the vote Sundays. I mean, where I mean, it hasn't nothing's passed, but that's the legislation basically based on the big lie. So the Voting Rights Act, would that nullify all of those regulations that they put into place?
It would nullify a lot of those as it relates to federal elections. And by virtue of doing that, you end up impacting state elections. But we cannot impose regulations on state elections.
Okay. Oh, yeah, because the states govern that. Okay, right. So just doing another sweep, and I think I think it's my pleasure now to, Kathy, did you have a question? No, Kathy Polson? I thought I saw a hand. Okay, so you're off the hook. So thank you very much, Congresswoman. We really appreciate you being here and sharing all this information about Ruth Bader Ginsburg and answering our questions. It just makes us feel, makes me feel, and I think many of my colleagues here, that there's real hope for an agenda that we can support, and for laws that are going to bring equity to our country and prosperity. I mean, she session is exactly it. I have two young friends who have thriving careers, who are now home helping their kids do school. Right. And it's going to hurt them for years to come. And I'm sure other people have similar experiences. So thank you very much. We appreciate your time. And
thank you. Well, we should all be optimistic about the fact that there are now 91 Democratic women in the House of Representatives. And I think in total, we have about 135 women. We're about 27% of Congress now. So it's nice, but it's not good enough. So
yeah,
it's our job to make sure those numbers increase.
Yeah, keep up the good fight. Thank you very much, Congresswoman.
All righty, bye-bye.
Bye.